Chapter 3. The Perfect Dinner Party. The hours leading up to Saturday evening felt like a tightening wire for Elara. She found herself engaging in behaviors she normally prescribed to her high-functioning anxiety patients: obsessive cleaning, triple-checking the locks, and rearranging furniture for optimal sightlines. She was transforming her sanctuary into a fortress, but the most dangerous variable was already invited inside. "This is still therapy," she repeated, scrubbing the kitchen counter with fierce determination. "I am observing his integration into a free society. I am maintaining control." But the truth was, she was terrified of the second face he might reveal once the protective glass of her profession was removed. At exactly 7 p.m. a sleek black sedan pulled up to Elara's unassuming gate. The doorbell chimed the same delicate, ordinary sound that had accompanied the ominous invitation card. When Elara opened the door, the man standing there bore little resemblance to the prisoner she had counseled. Ethan Vance was immaculate. He wore a tailored suit in charcoal gray, the fabric hinting at an expensive origin. His movements were fluid, effortless, lacking the stiff, contained energy he displayed in the prison chair. He carried a bottle of wine, a vintage Keats Durain, presented with the practiced grace of a seasoned host, not a newly released inmate. "Elara," he said, his voice now lower, richer, no longer constrained by the microphone in the therapy room. "Thank you for having me. Your home is lovely. So private." "Come in, Ethan," Elara replied, forcing a smile that felt tight on her face. She led him through the living room, her eyes darting between his relaxed hands and the nearest heavy object. Ethan took in the room slowly, deliberately. He didn't just glance. He assessed. His gaze lingered on the large bay window, the position of the heavy oak sideboard, and the narrow hallway leading to the bedrooms. "You have exquisite taste," Ethan complimented, setting the wine on the counter. "The wood and leather. It speaks of comfort, but also of great discipline. Everything serves a purpose." Elara poured them both a glass of wine, grateful for the momentary distraction. "You seem well integrated, Ethan. What have you been doing since your release?" "Planning," he answered, taking a sip. His eyes were focused on the deep crimson color of the wine, but his mind seemed elsewhere. "Building a foundation and thinking about our sessions. The structure you provided was essential. You taught me how to articulate the narrative I needed." The word narrative struck a nerve. Elara felt a chill, remembering Miller's warning about the perfect tragedy narrative. "I taught you to understand your own truth." "Ethan," she corrected, sharply. Ethan smiled again. That perfectly executed, unsettling smile. "And my truth set me free." "A fair trade, wouldn't you say?" They moved to the dining room. Elara had prepared a simple but elegant meal, a roast chicken and fresh vegetables. She hoped the normalcy of the situation would break the unnatural tension, but Ethan refused to allow it. As they ate, Ethan began probing, always under the guise of gratitude or curiosity. "This kitchen layout is quite ingenious," he remarked. "If there were ever a power outage, the flashlight would have to be in that specific drawer by the stove, wouldn't it?" "It's the most logical place." "It's just where I keep the flashlight," Elara said, her hand tightening around her fork. "Of course," Ethan agreed smoothly. "But logic is a habit. You are a woman of meticulous habits, Elara. When do you run? Do you take the path through the forest or stick to the quiet roads?" "Ethan, this is not a session," Elara warned, her voice losing its practiced softness. "This is a dinner between two people who have concluded their professional relationship." He met her gaze, his eyes calm, almost apologetic. "My apologies, Dr. Habit. I'm merely fascinated by the architecture of your life. It's comforting to know that some people maintain such perfect, predictable order. It makes the world feel safer." "Predictable order," she muttered, Remembering the file of the architect she had packed away, the killer obsessed with structure, Ivan rose from his chair, glass in hand, and walked toward the large, old bookcase that dominated the far wall. He stopped in front of a section devoted to obscure criminal case studies. "These are interesting titles," he observed. "You have an entire shelf dedicated to the cases of the architect. He seems to have fascinated you." "He was an anomaly," Elara admitted. "The mind that built his crimes was almost flawless in its design." Ethan turned, a slow predatory shift in his posture. He leaned against the bookcase, casually displacing a small framed photograph of Elara and her late husband. "He didn't pick it up. He just left it tilted precariously." "A mind that is almost flawless is still flawed," Ethan corrected, his voice dropping. "But consider this, Elara. What if the architect hadn't merely studied the law, the police procedures, and the victim profiles? What if he had studied the only person who had the key to unlock the front door of the system? What if he had studied you?" His gaze was unwavering. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. The mask of the grateful patient had dissolved, replaced by a cold clarity that terrified Elara more than any violent outburst could have. "Your home is a perfect extension of your psyche, Elara," Ethan concluded, a chilling finality in his tone. "And now that I'm here, I realize there are no hidden rooms. No surprises left." Elara looked at the tilted photograph. The subtle, meticulous violation of her perfect order was a clear message. She didn't respond to his words. She responded to the action. "He's not observing my life," she thought, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "He's testing the structural integrity of my existence." "I believe our evening is concluded, Ethan," Elara said, rising from the table, her professionalism now a weapon of self-defense. It was ... illuminating. Chapter 4. The ghost of the architect Elara did not bother clearing the dinner table. She stood motionless in the dining room until the sound of Ethan's sedan had completely faded into the remote hum of the forest. The silence that followed was not the peaceful isolation she craved. It was a vast, cold expanse waiting to be filled by him again. She walked back to the tilted photograph. The casual disrespect, the calculated displacement of a memory was a scream in the quiet room. It wasn't about the photograph. It was a challenge, a signature. "I was here. I saw you. And I know precisely how to break your order." Miller's grim face and coarse voice echoed in her mind. "Hunji gc na mtqn sach jiao koa." Elara, the highly analytical doctor who could see through layers of self-deception, had been played with the ease of a child's toy. Her professional vanity, her pride, and her perfect cure had been the key Ethan used to unlock the front door of her life. She spent the next hour meticulously restoring her house to its exact prior state. The flashlight was returned to its logical drawer. The photograph was straightened, aligned precisely with the edge of the shelf. By enforcing order, she was attempting to enforce control over her own escalating panic. But the questions Ethan had posed about her running routes, her security system, her habits, kept circling like vultures. He wasn't observing her. He was mapping her boundaries. By midnight, the pretense of control was exhausted. Elara bypassed her usual storage area and descended into the dark, damp stone basement, a place she rarely visited. She needed the only source of pure, unadulterated chaos she knew, the sealed police file on the architect. The box was heavy, marked with fading crime tape. She carried it upstairs, ripping the seal with unsteady hands. She laid the original file, the one with no name, only a chilling pseudonym, out on her clean oak desk, placing it beside the official Ethan Vance parole documents. The contrast was immediate and stark. The architect's file was a monument to emptiness. No motive, No discernible pattern, only a meticulous, artistic arrangement of the victim's final moments. The police report spoke of a lack of human empathy so profound it defied classification. Ethan Vance's file, conversely, was a portrait of overwhelming human empathy, a sudden, tragic outburst of rage, followed by profound remorse and intellectual self-analysis. A beautiful, flawed narrative designed to evoke pity and understanding. Elara started the cross-reference, her training kicking in, burying the fear beneath clinical methodology. She focused on the core facts of the Vance case. 1. The victim profile. Vance was convicted of killing a vagrant who had supposedly provoked him. Elara looked at the victim's life, a man named Silas. Homeless, no family, no digital footprint. Convenient, she thought. Most of the architect's early, lesser-known victims were also marginal figures. Easy to dispose of and harder to mourn. 2. The crime scene. The report stated a chaotic struggle in a dimly lit alley. But Elara recalled Ethan's words in therapy. The chaos was just the shell, doctor. I instantly regretted the lack of control. That regret, that focus on control, was too sophisticated for a random manslaughter case. It was the same regret the architect would have felt after a sloppy job. 3. The alibi witness. A single witness, a taxi driver on a break, provided the account of Vance's distress and subsequent surrender. Elara looked up the taxi driver's name, cross-referencing public records. She found a fate trail. The driver had filed for bankruptcy 6 months before the Vance incident and suddenly paid off a significant debt shortly afterward. Blackmail or payment. The realization was a cold burn in her chest. Elara pushed Vance's parole file away, the pages suddenly feeling contaminated. The meticulously crafted narrative wasn't flawed. It was a perfectly tailored costume. The entire Vance identity, the manslaughter charge, the victim. The remorseful intellect was engineered not to fool the prison system, but specifically to fool her. She remembered Ethan's unsettling question during dinner. If there were ever a power outage, the flashlight would have to be in that specific drawer. It's the most logical place. The Ethan Vance file was the flashlight in the most logical drawer. A readily available truth that distracted from the terrifying. Secret hidden in the architect's empty filing cabinet. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the final piece of evidence from the architect's sealed box. A grainy, black and white photograph of a man's face, taken by a surveillance camera years ago. The best image the police ever had of the elusive killer. Elara held the photo next to a recent high-resolution portrait of Ethan Vance. The man in the architect's photo was heavier. His features harsher, but the structure of the bone beneath the skin, the deep-set eyes, and the slight asymmetrical curve of the jaw were unmistakable. It wasn't a perfect match, but it was close enough to confirm the terror that gripped her soul. He didn't need to steal an identity. He simply needed to modify his own, then create a perfect story around the modification. The phone rang, shattering the midnight silence. Elara stared at the caller ID. Ethan Vance. She didn't answer. The silence of the ringing was replaced by a synthesized voicemail message. Dr. Vane. Ethan's rich, calm voice whispered through the speaker. I hope you are sleeping well in your perfectly ordered home. I just called to let you know that I've finally found the architect's greatest vulnerability, his identity, and thank you again for helping me secure it. The call disconnected. Elara knew then that her next move couldn't be subtle. She needed to know what had happened to the real Ethan Vance, the man whose file was stolen. She needed to confirm the death, not just the lie. The sanctuary was gone. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5. The Forged File. The synthetic voice of the voicemail replay vibrated in the silent house, cutting through the remnants of Elara's professional certainty. Double quotes. I finally found the architect's greatest vulnerability. his identity, and thank you again for helping me secure it. The message was a confession, a taunt, and a declaration of war. He knew she knew. The subtle game was over. The meticulous, real-world hunt had begun. Elara didn't wait for dawn. The immediate priority wasn't calling Miller. That would require exposing her colossal error. Her priority was confirming the central fraud. What happened to the real Ethan Vance? A dead man's identity is the most secure cloak of all. She went to her office, locking the door and pulling the blinds tight. She couldn't risk using her main phone line. Digging through a drawer of ancient equipment, she found an old, disposable satellite phone she kept for emergency consultations in unstable environments. The contact she needed was Dr. Anya Sharma, the chief medical officer at the correctional facility. Anya was pragmatic, discreet, and indebted to Elara for once saving her from a professional scandal. Elara kept the conversation brief, her voice low and tight. Anya, I need a favor. An immediate, critical favor, and you must not tell anyone. Elara, what's wrong? You sound... I need the complete medical and death records for a former inmate. Ethan Vance, specifically the original medical file and the certified death certificate from 2 years ago. I need the hard copy originals, scanned and encrypted, sent to this secure line. Now, Anya, no questions. Anya, recognizing the gravity in Elara's voice, only paused for a beat. I'll do it, Elara, but if this touches the bureau, I never spoke to you. Agreed. The wait was agonizing. Elara moved through the early morning shadows of her home like a ghost, double-checking the locks, taping a tiny strand of her own hair across the door to her office, and disabling the antiquated motion sensors that might reveal her position to an unseen observer. She realized the absurdity. She was using primitive psychological tricks against a man who could outsmart satellite intelligence. The hours bled into a hostile morning. The sun, when it finally rose, seemed too bright, too revealing. Finally, the satellite phone buzzed a short, sharp vibration. Anya had sent the encrypted file. Elara downloaded the package onto a clean, air-gapped laptop, disconnecting the machine from the network entirely. She input the decryption key, and the files populated her screen. Vance. Ethan. Inmate ID 9844B. She focused on the last document. Official certificate of death, prison issue. The truth was laid bare. Ethan Vance died 2 years prior from terminal liver disease. A quiet, unremarkable death in the prison infirmary. The death was routine, the body cremated. Elara felt a dizzying mix of relief and terror. The identity was definitively stolen, confirming her worst fears about the architect. But the relief was short-lived. A dead man's file is absolute. It is the perfect, untraceable alibi. The architect was now a phantom, legally retired from the system. She scrolled back to the original medical records. The details were mundane routine blood tests, palliative care logs. But Elara's eyes, trained to find patterns in chaos, snagged on a microscopic detail, the timestamp on the final page of the medical discharge log. It was digitally signed 2 hours after the death. Certificate was officially filed by a non-medical staff member. The architect hadn't just stolen the file. He had manipulated the system. He wasn't relying on a simple clerical error. He used the brief window between a confirmed death and final processing to insert his own modified narrative, a perfect, small hole in a massive bureaucratic wall. He had created the character of remorseful Ethan Vance years ago, timing his entry into the system to coincide with the real Ethan's quiet expiration. The real Ethan Vance's life was merely the perfect blank canvas for the architect's masterpiece of deception. Elara closed the laptop, a cold dread settling in her gut. She had solved the riddle of the identity, but in doing so, She had dangerously exposed her one ally dot. She quickly wiped the laptop and placed the satellite phone in a lead line box. As she did so, her house phone chimed with a notification. It was a weather alert routine. Useless information dot, but below the standard text, there was a single cryptic line of non-weather related text that had bypassed all her security filters. Appearing only on her screen, Dr. Sharma sends her warmest regards. The cold in her office must be dreadful this morning, the architect. Knew about it NYA. The architect knew about the call. The sanctuary was not only compromised, it was bugged. Elara Vane was completely isolated, and her every move was now part of the architect's final flawless plan. Chapter Vi, the architect's cord, blood drained from Elara's face, leaving her skin taut and white. Dr. Sharma sends her warmest regards. The message was less a threat to Anya and more a demonstration of absolute chilling power. The architect hadn't merely compromised her home network. He was inside her life, watching her move, listening to her breathe. Isolation was his first weapon. Elara was entirely cut off. Calling Miller meant exposing Anya, revealing her monumental professional failure, and giving the architect a fatal head start. The police wouldn't find a trace of evidence. They would only find Elara, the brilliant psychologist, having a paranoid breakdown over an innocent, paroled man. She walked to the window, pulling the curtain back an inch. The rain had stopped, but the fog rolling in from the forest was thick, reducing the world to a small, damp circle around her house. She couldn't see the wiretaps, the hidden cameras, or the potential sniper, but she knew they were there. He's not observing my location. He's observing my reaction. Elara forced herself to take a seat at her desk. Facing the evidence, the architect's cold, grainy photo, the real Ethan Vance's death certificate, and the ominous silence of the surveillance, she began the one thing she knew how to do better than anyone else: profile the predator in the room. She didn't need to look for flaws in his plan. She needed to look for flaws in his self-image. Every criminal mastermind, every narcissist, no matter how flawless their execution, is driven by a core, fragile need. The architect's crimes were not about pleasure or money. They were about design. She opened her clean notebook and wrote 2 columns. The flawless design, the mask, the core vulnerability, the face, complete. Control, fear of chaos, error, intellectual superiority, desperate. Need for recognition, anonymity, phantom, need to leave a signature, meticulous. Planning compulsion to reveal the plan. Elara realized that the architect's ultimate goal wasn't just to kill her. It was to prove her wrong. He needed her to understand the sheer genius of his plan before it destroyed her. He needed the validation of his greatest intellectual rival. He needs an audience. He didn't just study me to get out, Elara whispered to the silence of the room, fully aware he was listening. He studied me to find the perfect audience for his greatest performance. If he wanted an audience, she would give him one. She picked up her old house phone, dialing a number she knew by heart, the secure line to Miller's office. She didn't expect him to pick up. She just needed to create the noise. As the phone began to ring, she started talking, not to Miller, but to the unseen listener. The case of the architect was never about the victims. Miller, Elara began, her voice steady and professional, drawing on her years of experience in recorded interviews. It was about geometry. His crime scenes were immaculate, symmetrical, perfectly balanced. That order is his weakness. It's too predictable. She walked to the large bay window, standing in full view. She looked directly at the glass, as if staring through the lens of a camera she knew was aimed at her. He believes his identity, or lack thereof, is his greatest strength. But the real architect is the man whose pride won't allow him to simply kill and vanish. He requires a critic. He requires proof of his superiority. The ringing stopped. The voicemail tone began. Elara hung up, Having left no message, but having delivered a clear declaration to her true listener, the house phone immediately rang back. Unknown number. The architect was calling. Elara took a deep breath, letting her therapist's mask drop over her fear. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, architect," Elara said, the name sounding foreign and heavy on her tongue. A soft chuckle came through the line. "A bold assumption, Dr. Vane. I thought we were done with the professional titles." "You may call me Ethan." "Ethan Vance is dead," Elara corrected, her voice ice cold. "The man I'm speaking to is nothing more than a derivative of a lie. You are the man who needs constant external validation for his self-worth. You are not a genius. You are merely a perfectionist with a very high body count." The line went silent. It was a calculated, manipulative silence, but Elara recognized the pause of true shock. She had hit the target. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice dangerously low. "You wound me, Elara. I called to thank you again for the beautiful dinner. But since you insist on playing this game, I sent you a housewarming gift. I left it on the porch. You might want to retrieve it before the fog gets too thick." He hung up, leaving Elara staring at the phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was close. He was toying with her dot against every instinct. Elara had to see the gift. The architect had shown his signature. He required her to participate in his design. She walked to the front door, pulling the heavy lock back. The fog outside was suffocatingly close. Swirling around the porch light, lying on the mat was a large sealed manila envelope. No dress, no stamp. Just a perfectly placed object. Elara snatched the envelope and slammed the door shut, locking it again. Her hands shook as she tore open the flap. Inside, there were two items: a high-resolution photograph of Dr. Anya Sharma, taken through the window of her office, sitting exactly where Elara knew she would be at that hour, a single, intricately folded piece of thick white paper. Elara unfolded it. It was a perfectly drawn, highly detailed floor plan of Elara Vane's house. Every room, every window, every closet was meticulously labeled. But one section, her safe room, hidden behind the bookshelf, was circled in sharp crimson ink, and scrawled across the bottom in elegant, practiced handwriting was the message: "The architect is ready to begin the final session. Elara, come find me, or I will come finish the design."